joining us right now on the Boardwalk on the hotline to get more into who are these players who were drafted by your Philadelphia Eagles, as well as other teams around the NFL. He is the one and only Emory Hunt. He is the czar of the playbook at F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter. And as all guests, he appears on the Boardwalk on the hotline. Emory, good to see you. How you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Josh. I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you jumping on. You know, you're someone who studies these players as much, if not more, than almost anybody I can think of. And to me, when I think about who these players are, I want to ask you, and I want to start with the guy at the top for the Eagles. There's a lot of perspective out there. The people feel that the Philadelphia Eagles, when they traded up to Devonta Smith, that was more than just them saying we need a wide receiver. They were saying, a lot of people believe in this draft, we are going with best player available. So with that in mind, what does that say to you about how the Philadelphia Eagles view Devonta Smith?
Well, they view him as their number one option in the passing game, to help their franchise quarterback, Jalen Hurts, do what he does best and find targets, at the intermediate level and deep down the field. So for them going up to get Devonta Smith, it not only helps them out in the passing game, but it also took away a potential target for the New York Giants, who I feel as though would have strongly selected Smith if had he been there when they were on the clock, which is why they jumped ahead of Dallas to take their guy, because the Cowboys looked at it, well, hey, the guy that we probably were targeting went just a pick before us to Denver, so we could take a step back and gather more picks and take a different guy, our second defensive player on the board. So therefore, it allowed the Eagles to jump ahead of the Giants and take the Heisman Trophy winner.
Now, people know that he's the Heisman Trophy winner, but what else can you tell people about what Devonta Smith brings to an Eagles offense that will be different this year because it's Nick Sirianni's offense and not longer Doug Peterson's?
Well, he gives them the home run threat. They have a home run threat type of player at quarterback in Jalen Hurts. They have now one out on the perimeter in Devonta Smith. And because of Jalen Hurts' ability to run, you buy a byproduct of that is having a home run hitter in the backfield in Miles Sanders. So they're going to be explosive at all three levels. And when you factor in, Dallas Goedert, growing into the role as a move tight end, as a flex tight end, and if they're able to keep Zach Ertz, it allows them now to be so dynamic on offense. Jalen Reagor should improve in the second year. So having Devonta Smith gives you someone that you have to pay attention to. And so you just can't really double up on one guy and take one guy out of the game. You have to slide coverage toward Devonta Smith, or he could just beat you straight off the line, or he's a good catch and run guy as well. So it just opens up the offense as a whole.
You mentioned about Jalen Hurts. Do you read anything into the idea that the Eagles were looking to maybe also, not just best player available, but maybe also say, hey, Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts, they play together. Dickerson and Hurts, they play together. There's a familiarity there. Maybe we could have these guys grow with each other just like they were at Alabama a little bit.
It just so happens that those were also some of the best players at the position. So it just worked out that way. So I don't think they went into the situation trying to find all of his teammates at either Alabama or Oklahoma. It just so happened that those two guys were amongst the top tier at the position, and it just so happens that they fell. And it just so happens that they were also teammates of Jalen Hurts. So it worked out for them. They got really good players, to help out that offense. And we should see an offense look a lot better, much more cohesive and much more consistent this season under Nick Sirianni.
Emory Hunt joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter. Also, Football Game Plan on YouTube for all of your college football, NFL draft, and all kinds of football analysis over there on the YouTube channel. Emory, I touched on Dickerson for a minute. A lot of people have questions about him. He's had multiple injuries. Can he avoid those injuries? I know some people bring up, Anthony Munoz and Orlando Pace, that they had injuries in college and that they were fine as NFL players. I'm not saying he's going to be Hall of Famers, but, is there a possibility that Dickerson may have already gotten the injuries out of the way, or do you have concerns about his durability in the NFL?
I do have concerns because the last time we saw Landon Dickerson, he was getting injured on the field. He's been injured every year in college outside of maybe 1 or 2 years sandwiched in between. But for the most part, every year he has dealt with an injury. And that's concerning because that's something that just seems to, follow you no matter where you go. And that's why it's always tough to see guys that are so talented that can't stay healthy. It's not no fault of their own. It's just an unfortunate series of events. And when you think about someone like Dickerson, who's played across the offensive line, so he can play any one of the 5 positions, but just has been snake bitten by the injury bug. And that's unfortunate because you want to bank on him. You want to, count on him to be one of those guys. But as soon as you put all your eggs in that basket, something happens and he goes down with an injury. Now you're back to square one. So, yeah, it is a bit of a concern. So I think the Eagles will try to bring him along slowly to see how he's able to progress. And then you can start putting that full faith in him because he's a tremendous talent. If he's 100%, he's one of the best players in the draft regardless of position.
Let's go deeper into the draft for the Eagles. Tell us about who Milton Williams is and why should they care that the Eagles drafted him.
He's a really good player, versatile, was a defensive end that moved inside the tackle, so it gives you a little bit of flexibility and versatility. He's quick off the ball. He's bringing those defensive end skills inside, so you get someone that can be a little bit of a pressure player for the Eagles. And he may not start, but, at the end of the day, you're drafting guys to help you out and to help you win football games, so he'll be a good part of the rotation that helped that Eagles defense get better than 2021.
Let's stay on the D line. Later in the draft, they took Tehran Jackson from Coastal Carolina. I like that pick. I think it's a great value pick in my personal opinion because I got to see a lot of Coastal Carolina out there. Explain to folks, what does Jackson bring to the Eagles potentially depth-wise?
Stylistically, he's very similar to that of Brandon Graham. They're both shorter, stockier guys that can bring it off the edge. And Jackson was the Defensive Player of the Year in the Sun Belt Conference, was an AP All-American as well. So he's very productive. You talk about double-digit sacks, double-digit TFL. So the guy was getting the job done on both ends of defense. I thought that was a very underrated selection by Philadelphia.
Let's go into your wheelhouse. I think the steal of the draft for the Eagles was Gainwell, the running back from Memphis. I think this guy has the potential to be a steal in this draft, not just for the Eagles, but in terms of maybe the entire NFC East, because they get a guy that talented at that point in the draft. It tells me that, you found value where other people didn't.
It's interesting to see him fall because you consider all the backs that came out of Memphis. Every one of those guys played well in tandem. So I do think him landing to Philadelphia kind of helps out the run game. While he may not be the most dynamic player or explosive player, he's a very productive player. And running sidecar to Miles Sanders just helps that run game, especially when you factor in a mobile quarterback in Jalen Hurts. So it also proves that he doesn't need volume. Coming from Memphis, you're going to split carries, so you don't need volume to be successful, and that's going to be the role he's going to play here in Philadelphia.
You mentioned about the running back tandem. Also, think about the head coach situation. Sirianni, we saw what he did with the Chargers. We saw what he was doing with the Colts. They like to use multiple running backs in these different roles. So it seems like in some ways that Sirianni might be trying to replicate some of that success he had in the past here in Philadelphia.
Hey, when it works, you play the hits. And the fact of the matter is that you have guys that can do a lot of different things, and you just try to stockpile the depth chart, with backfield talent. And that's why you have guys that you select. If guys fall and you see a need there, you feel it. And I think they did that with Gainwell.
Emory Hunt joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at FBall Game Plan on Twitter, also on YouTube at Football Game Plan. Emory, I want to ask you a little bit about a couple of players who were drafted outside the Eagles. I want to start with two quarterbacks. I love where Trey Lance ended up. I think it's the perfect fit for him. I feel like it's the perfect fit for San Francisco. I feel like there were a lot of tea leaves that are pointing people in that direction. I think this could be another, I'm not saying he's Pat Mahomes, but maybe another Pat Mahomes situation where a guy can just sit for a year, really refine his skill, and then come and burst on the scene, because I just think that what he brings to the table, what San Francisco will ask him to do, just makes too much sense.
He reminds me a lot of Jordan Love, and that Jordan Love situation, I think, will help him out. The benefit he has now this year is that he'll be able to play in preseason. He'll get a ton of reps in the preseason, which is key because that'll help, bolster his development. But he'll need to sit a year, in my opinion, because you're coming from the FCS, not playing a lot of games, not a lot of starts. The one game you played in this year was kind of okay from a throwing perspective, but from a running perspective, he was outstanding. But you kind of want him to really, get on board with the passing game. That's why the preseason will be critical for him, which is why the fact that we're in a normal type situation should be huge. And I just think that going to a situation where he's not going to be thrust into the starting lineup right away, he can sit back a little bit behind Jimmy Garoppolo, as long as Garoppolo doesn't get injured or doesn't completely, implode, he's going to have the opportunity to grow, learn the system, get acclimated with what the system is, and work on those finer things of, within his mechanics, and be able to hit the ground running, I believe, hopefully in 2022.
What are your thoughts on Justin Fields landing in Chicago?
I think that's a home run hit for Chicago. They finally landed a quarterback that's been outstanding, man. Jim McMahon was talented, but he couldn't stay healthy. Jim Harbaugh had some success, here and there with Chicago. Jay Cutler got them to an NFC title game, but there was always something missing about Cutler that just really didn't ingratiate himself with the fans. But now the entire fan base is going to be behind Justin Fields, and he's super talented. He's my number 2 quarterback in the draft. So I think they got themselves what they've been looking for quite some time.
Is it fair to say that maybe Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy saved their jobs by doing this?
I believe so, because Justin Fields is a great player. They're going to win some games. They're going to win a lot of games. He got to the playoffs 2 out of the 3 years with Mitch Trubisky, and now you upgrade that position, with that defense, with some of the talent coming back in the backfield. Tariq Cohen's going to be healthy. They got talent on the perimeter, and if Tevin Jenkins can be as what he's advertised to be along the offensive line, then you won't have any issues there. So I think the Bears are in much better shape by just adding one player as opposed to what they were last year and the last couple of years. Very talented defense, a lot of good playmakers on offense, but was handicapped by their quarterback play. That won't be the case, even if he's a rookie with Justin Fields.
Jumping back to the NFC, I thought that the picks by Micah Parsons for the Cowboys and then later Jabril Cox for Dallas were 2, really picks that were making statements. They're kind of saying, listen, we are going to change this defense. We are taking this defensive situation seriously.
Yeah, and you look at a guy that's a plug-and-play starter in, Micah Parsons. You wonder, Jabril Cox is a good coverage guy, so he'll be a sub-package player, but he'll start out on special teams. Defensively, they were terrible last year. So if they improve just, I don't want to say significantly, but just decently on defense, right, along with Dak Prescott coming back, then they should be in the playoffs easily. That team was one game away from the playoffs this year with all that chaos that was going on at quarterback, on defense, and they were still right there at the end with a chance to get into the playoffs. So you get a healthy Dak with all those weapons. You get, some improvement on defense with a playmaker like Parsons and a good coverage guy in Cox. It helps you out. And I think Dallas will be one of the top teams in the NFC, let alone the NFC East.
Did the Giants reach for Kadarius Toney?
I don't think so. He's a guy that could put the ball in the paint. He's outstanding in that regard. And he's going to a great situation with a great coach in Tyke Tolbert, who does a great job in coaching up the wide receivers. And, if they were targeting Devonta Smith and he was gone, you find the next best option. To me, Toney reminds me a lot of Antonio Brown and how he's able to make things happen after the catch. He's going to be a dynamic run after the catch player. He's much more savvy as a route runner than given credit for, and we'll see a lot of that utilized with the Giants. So I don't think it was a reach. He's a tremendous player. There's no downside to stockpiling talented players on your football team.
For the Eagles, they only walked out of this draft with Zech McPherson from Texas Tech. Obviously, it's a big need for the Eagles. What were your perspective on the cornerbacks after the top 4 who were picked? It seems like the teams were kind of saying there was a serious drop-off in their view of the guys who were the top 4 versus the next group of corners.
Well, you thought that all health permitting, Caleb Farley was going to go high. And so, obviously the Eagles probably didn't have as high of thoughts on his medical as other teams. But had one of those corners been there, J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain, I don't think they would have taken Devonta Smith. I think they would have targeted the cornerback. But, getting a guy like Zech McPherson is excellent. He gives them more competition out there on the corner. I love his athleticism, his ball skills, and he's not afraid to tackle. He's a physical guy. So he fits the mantra of what Philly wants at that position. But I just think that the way the first round fell, the top 10, kind of altered their approach to the draft, which is why they made the move to go up and get Devonta Smith, because I truly believe had one of those corners been there for them at 12, they would have made that move instead of the receiver.
Real quick on McPherson, one more thing, and that is some people are questioning, is he an outside corner or an inside corner? I've heard people say he's very versatile. Is he a guy that can eventually be a starting outside corner, or do you think his future is elsewhere on defense?
If he's versatile, it doesn't matter where, I say he's going to be or somebody else says he's going to be, the versatility yields itself to him being a matchup guy on game day. So whatever the matchup dictates, sometimes you may have to play inside primarily against a certain receiver. Sometimes the matchup dictates you got to go outside, and he can do both. So that's a good thing for that secondary.
Emory, one more for you. Appreciate you always jumping on here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, at FBall Game Plan on Twitter, Football Game Plan on YouTube. One of my favorite landing spots, when Rashad Bateman landed with Baltimore, I feel like that's a home run for Baltimore, because I saw way too many games where Bateman was making catches he was not supposed to be making, and I feel like he might be a perfect fit for exactly what Baltimore needs on that offense.
I think he's more of a possession guy than anything. I love his ability to make catches, like you said. Has very good hands. I don't think he's as explosive or dynamic, so I see him more as a possession receiver, kind of like what they also drafted in Tylan Wallace. But Wallace seems to be more of a downfield threat despite not having the speed than Rashad Bateman. Both guys have great hands, and to me, in my opinion, if you can catch the football like they can, everything else will work itself out. So they got enough guys on the roster. They have some speed. You have Duvernay, you got Prochet, you got Hollywood Brown, but you got now some guys that have great consistent hands that really help out. Your quarterback gives him a wide catch radius. So Bateman is a solid receiver, and I think that's how he'll be, in Baltimore, given the opportunity.
Emory, before I let you go, let the folks know what kind of content you guys are pumping out now that the draft is done.
Well, we have our draft grades coming out probably in a week or two. We like to wait until the rookie mini camps are done, so that way we know which rookie tryout players are actually going to make the roster, because we include undrafted free agents in our draft grades, because that's a part of the draft class. So keep an eye out on our YouTube channel for that, but it's never too late to get a copy of our 2021 draft guide, because, again, the NFL rosters are transient, so you're going to see a ton of players, a ton of movement on these rosters, and best believe we have a scouting report on it. So that's footballgameplan.com/2021 draft guide.
There he is, an F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter. Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, as all guests he appeared on the Boardwalk Hunter Hotline. I appreciate you jumping on. Great insights today.
Thanks so much, Josh. I appreciate you having me on.